Chapter 93. Clang. Facing the rain of arrows, with a few late condensing reality realm warriors glaring at him, Yichen did not dare to take it lightly. He immediately pulled out his hidden cloud sword. The pure Jun Jin Qi had a great effect on the sword art. Once Yichen threw out a sword attack, the snow-white sword light looked like a blooming lotus flower. The sharp light shot out in all directions, slicing the ground around Yichen into pieces. At the same time, numerous mountain-like silhouettes appeared within the sword light. They were extremely sharp and powerful. Combining the two together, it looked a bit like the legendary Blade Mountain. Condensed sword Qi. Yichen swung the sword straight out. The sword light was compressed infinitely and turned into a thick sword Qi. Because of its high speed, the air was cut open like water ripples, and the natural Yuan Qi was disrupted. In the eyes of the crowd, this was not a sword Qi at all, it was clearly a mountain. They suddenly felt that it was unstoppable, and their momentum was weakened by 80%. Swoosh! The flat ground was split open, and the horse bandits in the vicinity of this line were either split into two halves or crushed into a bloody mist by the aftermath of the sword Qi, leaving nothing behind. Then, the sword Qi's momentum did not diminish, and it slashed towards the leader of the horse bandits who was suppressing Su Jing. Sword Qi. The horse bandit leader sensed the change and looked over. He was shocked. A mid-condensing reality realm warrior could actually release sword Qi. Wasn't that something only clasping Yuan realm swordsmen could do? Moreover, this sword Qi was not an ordinary sword Qi. It contained the mentality of a mountain, which could crush and suppress everything. It was almost at the edge of the sword intent, and was only one step away from the supreme sword intent. After exchanging more than 10 moves, Su Jing was gradually suppressed by the horse bandit leader. However, she had also figured out his martial arts patterns. If she was not mistaken, this horse bandit leader should be one of the top horse bandit leaders in the Northwest Plain. His name was Qi Kuei, and he had reached the clasping Yuan realm a few years ago. His moves were very powerful. If she was not strong enough, she might not even be able to take 3 of his punches. After fighting for a while, Su Jing noticed that her opponent's attention had shifted, and she couldn't help but look over as well. In her line of sight, Yichen, who was dressed in a white robe, was like a towering mountain. He was clearly right in front of her, but he gave off the illusion that he was far away. This junior brother of mine is really amazing. There is the aura of Tao in his sword technique. As long as he is given time, he will definitely become a peerless swordsman in the future. Laughing out loud, Qi Kuei withdrew his left hand and threw out a punch, while saying, "No matter how talented you are only a mid-condensing reality realm warrior, what can you do to me?" Mountain-crashing fist, break. Kacha. The artistic conception in the sword Qi was the first to be broken. Then, the sword Qi collapsed and disappeared. However, Qi Kuei's body also stiffened. Strands of sword Qi flowed up along his arm, wanting to injure his foundation. Only after separating a portion of his true Qi could he eliminate the threat of the sword Qi. Su Jing understood what Yichen meant. He wanted to help her escape. With that thought in mind, all of her Jin Qi started to burn like fire. 2 illusory golden flame rings appeared behind her head, one big and one small. Low-rank Earth Realm Art, Golden 3 Realm Art. Yichen could tell that Su Jing had trained a low-rank Earth Realm Art, Golden 3 Realm Art. This art was extremely powerful. The 7th stage was called the Shocking Sky, the 8th stage was called the Extreme Void Sky, and the 9th stage was called the Sky Top Sky. When the 3 stages combined, it could suppress everything and was unstoppable. However, Su Jing had obviously trained it to the 8th stage, the Extreme Void Sky. When the 2 stages combined, her power suddenly increased. With a single punch, Qi Kuei was forced to take 4 steps back. Open! Not in the mood to fight anymore, Su Jing just charged forward. The burning golden Jin Qi instantly pushed away the people who were in her way. She did not even care about her horse, she flew towards Wu Zongming and the other 3. Yichen did not stop her either. He turned around and threw out 13 sword attacks. streams of mountain-like sword chi flew towards Chi Kuei, who was chasing after him. His feet did not even touch the ground as he flew backwards. With the help of Su Jing and Yi Chen, Wu Zongming and the other three finally got out of the encirclement. For horses and 2 people, their speed increased to the limit. Like lightning, they gradually disappeared into the distance. Damn this brat! Chi Kuei was furious. He stomped on the ground, causing it to shake continuously. He threw out a series of punches, which turned into countless fist shadows that shattered the mountain-like sword chi. Brother, what do we do now? A leader of the horse gang could not help but ask with red eyes. Chi Kuei calmed down his boiling blood and tried to suppress his unstable emotions. He asked, how many brothers did we lose? 23 in total. Besides me, all the other leaders were killed. 6 late condensing reality realm warriors were all killed. I am so angry. Chi Kuei's eyes were wide open and bloodshot. Although there were only about 50 people in this bandit group, every one of them was a veteran of hundreds of battles, especially those 6 small leaders who had followed him to roam the Northwest Plains for several years. They were the foundation that he relied on. He never thought that they would all die in this battle. For a moment, his heart was bleeding. Brother, I have told you before, don't hang out with Ouyang brother. They are both core disciples of the martial school, they have powerful people behind them. Although they give us a lot of gold and treasures every time, we are risking our lives for them. But they don't even need to do anything, yet they get the biggest share. I know about this. Chi Kuei was indeed the leader of a horse gang. Although he was angry, he still had some calmness in his heart. He said, we have already offended the Sky Cloud Martial School, we cannot have another conflict with the Purple Sun Martial School. Let's avoid contact with Ouyang brother from now on. Right now, let's leave the Northwest Plain and go out to recruit people, hoping to make a comeback. You are right, brother. After fighting their way out of the encirclement, Yi Chen and Wu Zongming rode on one horse, while Su Jing and one of the female disciples rode on the other. Taking out a mysterious green pellet and throwing it to Yi Chen, Su Jing said, the rest of the journey will inevitably be dangerous. This is a mysterious recovering pellet, it can help you recover your lost Jin Qi. Yi Chen had heard about the mysterious recovering pellet before. It cost 3,000 gold for one pellet, and it could recover Jin Qi 10 times faster than usual. It was a necessity for high-level warriors. With just a glance, Yi Chen picked up the pellet and swallowed it. He then started to use his pure Jun Jin Qi to refine the pellet. In his dantian, the almost dried-up Jin Qi whirlpool was helped by the mysterious recovering pellet. Jin Qi continuously poured out, flowing into all the meridians in his body. Before, he first threw out the Tyrant Fist art, then he used the Lone Peak of 13 Swords. He used the poetic perspective of the Lone Peak of 13 Swords to create a sword qi that consumed a lot of Jin Qi. Although it was powerful, it could not last long. It was far weaker than a clasping Yuan Realm Warrior, after all, a mid-condensing Reality Realm Warrior was still too low. After 7 days, the group of 6 returned to the Sky Cloud Martial School in the Windy Mountain. The next half a month was no different than before, training, doing missions, and so on. Inadvertently, Yi Chen heard the news brought back by a disciple of the Sky Cloud Martial School who had participated in the auction. The North Snow Fastblade Lynch had safely returned to the North Snow Martial Academy. It was said that someone had seen the old man in gray, Dao So, in a very bad shape, with one of his arms broken. Chapter 94. The sea of clouds was rolling, the wind was blowing. You really want me to fight you with all my power? On a remote cliff, Su Jing, who was dressed in white, stood there. She was not tall, nor did she have a burly figure. She even looked a little delicate. However, no matter how strong the wind was, it could not shake her in the slightest. She was like a statue that had not fallen for thousands of years. Yi Chen nodded, I have trained a martial art, and it needs a lot of pressure to improve. So I want to use your help to train. What he was talking about was the pure jade body boosting spell. He had trained this martial art to the peak of the 3rd level a long time ago, but he had not been able to break through to the 4th level. He had been thinking about it these days, and realized that it would be very difficult for him to reach the 4th level by himself. Only by using other people's power to stimulate his own potential could he achieve it in a short period of time. If that is the case, then I will not hold back. Su Jing could tell that Yi Chen was serious. Although she was curious about what kind of martial art he had trained, she was not a talkative person. She would not ask what she should not ask. Cross the sea to kill the devil. Su Jing took a step forward with her right foot. All the rocks within a few meters radius floated into the air. She did not seem to be very fast, but she had already arrived in front of Yi Chen. She threw out a punch with a strong golden light. Yi Chen could feel the explosive power contained in this punch. He did not dare to waste any time. He pushed the pure jade body boosting spell with all his power. A layer of jade-like luster appeared on his skin. His body shook, and his Jin Qi was pushed to the limit. He threw out a punch as well. Chin. The two fists collided, and a strong shockwave spread out. A few huge black cracks appeared on the ground like snakes, spreading everywhere. So it really is more than 10,000 pounds of power. Because Yi Chen did not use any martial arts, his arm was numb, and his vision blurred. He almost fainted. Su Jing did not intend to hold back. She missed the first punch, but the second one followed. Destroy the mountain and flip the sea. That intense golden light, along with the sound of a tsunami, attacked towards Yi Chen's temple from the left side. The fist power hadn't arrived yet, but the fist wind had already arrived. It was like a lightning bolt and was as heavy as a mountain. Bang! Yi Chen stretched out his hand to block the punch. His left fist drilled out from his waist and began to counterattack. Alright, I'm going to use the power of the 7th level of the Golden Three Realms art. After repelling Yi Chen's fist energy with a single punch, an illusory golden ring of fire appeared behind Su Jing's head. Her entire body was burning with golden Jin Qi. Combined with her strength of over 10,000 Jin, she would be able to kill anyone who stood in her way. Yi Chen did not retreat nor evade. He laughed loudly and said, "Senior sister, go ahead and make your move." A cold glint flickered in Su Jing's eyes. With a twist of her feet, the surface of the cliff cracked. Soon after, her two fists, one on the left and one on the right, struck out, using the move she used to deal with Qi Kuei. Kachak! The jade-like luster on the surface of Yi Chen's body collapsed and was annihilated. His tall and straight body that was as steady as a mountain took 10 steps back, and every step he took was extremely heavy and emitted thumping sounds. Alright, again. Activating the pure jade body boosting spell, again, Yi Chen didn't care about the taste of blood in his throat. He rushed toward Su Jing. Back off. This fight was to help Yi Chen break through. There was no need for any fancy moves, only a solid head-on collision. Therefore, Su Jing threw out another punch, which once again made Yi Chen take 10 steps back. Again. Boom. Again. Towards the end, Yi Chen's 7 orifices began to bleed. The jade-like luster on the surface of his body became dim and looked like it would disappear at any time. However, the more it was like this, the more intense Yi Chen's fighting spirit became. His whole body was filled with profound qi, and even the mountain wind could not extinguish it. His tall and straight body was unyielding, as straight as a javelin, extremely sharp. It was like a piece of rough metal. After being polished thousands of times, it burst out with a sharpness that could pierce through gold and stone. Su Jing was shocked. What kind of martial art did Yi Chen train? Without using any martial skills, he could take more than 10 punches from her without falling down. Instead, it seemed like he was going to be reborn. Besides that, his fighting spirit really did look like a peerless swordsman. Knowing that it was not enough, the golden Jin Qi around Su Jing's body grew even stronger, and a bigger halo appeared behind her head. It was the sign of the 8th stage of the Golden Three Realm art, the extreme Taiji. With a punch, the mountain wind stopped, and the air was still. Only the cliff could not handle the power, and started to shake. Demons fall. Although the monster-killing fist art was a top-rank mortal realm martial skill, the power of the last movement was already extremely close to a low-rank earth realm martial skill. However, it was also quite troublesome to perform. Yi Chen had to push his golden 3-realm art to the 8th stage before he could use it. Otherwise, he would have to bear the huge counterforce and get slightly injured. It was similar to Yi Chen's Tyrant Fist art, but not as crazy. The golden light was like a waterfall, with a power that could pierce through a mountain. It flew towards Yi Chen. Pooh! The jade-like luster could not even last for a second, and was instantly destroyed. Yi Chen could only feel that the clouds on both sides were moving forward quickly. He felt something sweet in his throat, and a huge amount of blood spurted out, turning into a blood mist. The fast-moving clouds stopped moving, and Yi Chen's whole body was sunk into the mountain behind him. He could not even move a finger, and he felt weak and dizzy. With a bitter smile, Yi Chen said weakly, "Senior sister, are you trying to kill me? Stubborn diseases need strong medicine to cure them. It will save you a lot of trouble." Walking in front of Yi Chen, Su Jing opened Yi Chen's jaw, and threw a dark red pellet into his mouth. She said, "This is the body refining pellet that I usually use to train my strength. It is very effective. You don't need to move for now, in case you hurt your muscles and bones, and leave behind future problems." Yi Chen did not hear the last few words. Once the body refining pellet entered his throat, it turned into liquid and flowed down. With his stomach as the center, the medicinal power gradually spread to his internal organs, all the meridians in his body, and finally into his bones, continuously forcing out the impurities. Black impurities oozed out from the surface of Yi Chen's body, and the stench was overwhelming. Not knowing how long had passed, Yi Chen slowly opened his eyes. His bright eyes were like cold lightning, and also like the light of a sword, sharp and penetrating. "So smelly. Let's go back and wash up." She pressed her white and slim palm on the mountain and pushed out her hidden power, shaking Yi Chen out. Smelling himself, it was indeed smelly. Yi Chen said embarrassedly, "Thank you for your help, senior sister. If you need anything in the future, Yi Chen will definitely not decline. Let's go, you want to kill me with the stench." Su Jing said expressionlessly. A week had passed. That night, Yi Chen sat on his bed with his legs crossed, continuously practicing the pure jade body boosting spell. The jade-like luster on the surface of his body was flickering, sometimes it was bright, sometimes it was like his whole body was made of jade, sometimes it was dim, like a rock. Paw! A light, almost inaudible sound was heard as the jade-like luster shattered inch by inch, merging back into Yi Chen's body. Then, he spat it out, giving off a cold white light. It looked countless times tougher than before, giving off a diamond-like feeling. At this moment, the fourth spell of the pure jade body boosting spell, Broken Jade Rebirth, was completed. Chapter 95. Opening his eyes, Yi Chen jumped off the bed and performed a set of King Kong fist without using his Jin Qi. The wind from the punch whistled through the room, causing the furniture and the wooden windows in the room to make rattling sounds. Finally, they broke into pieces and scattered all over the floor. "Wow, my strength has increased by 5,000 pounds and reached 20,000 pounds. Yi Chen immediately felt the great increase in his physical strength. He seemed to have endless energy and could kill 5 water buffaloes in a row with one punch. Qi power was not like Jin Qi, which was limited by the limits of the human body, and would grow very slowly. It would already be amazing for a martial artist to reach 20,000 pounds. Even clasping Yuan realm martial artists did not have such a powerful body, unless they had also trained a body-strengthening martial art. Senior sister Su Jing must have used 70 to 80% of her strength that day, otherwise her last punch could have killed me. Thinking of the power of the golden 3-realm art, and the monster-killing fist art, Yi Chen knew his limits and did not think that his opponent had used her full strength. Nothing happened that night. The next morning, the sun was high up in the sky. Stepping on the sunlight, Yi Chen arrived at the floating cloud palace. The palace was empty, there were only 3 or 4 people choosing missions, it was very quiet. Walking to the gray jade wall, Yichen looked at it and fixed his eyes on the last mission in the first row. It seemed to be newly posted. Mission: go to the ancient water lake and help the Chu family find the lost ship. Details: there is a dangerous place in the ancient water lake called the 9 Bends and 18 Bends. There are many demonic beasts in the water and it is accompanied by underwater whirlpools. It is extremely dangerous. Mission difficulty: 5-star gray level. Mission reward: 120,000 gold. The ancient water lake, isn't that in the extreme north of the Windy Nation? It is so far away from here. Yichen had heard of the name of the ancient water lake. It was said that this lake had existed for 3,000 years. In the early days, it was just a small lake. Later, there was a big earthquake and everything within thousands of miles sank into the ground. After 3,000 years of irrigation, it became the ancient water lake today. In the early days, the ancient water lake was not dangerous, but the current ancient water lake was extremely dangerous. It seemed that the earthquake had released the ancient demonic beasts underground, which had occupied the entire ancient water lake, causing some fish and prawns that were not demonic beasts to mutate and become one of the demonic beasts. In the middle of the ancient water lake, there was a large island named Pan Shan Island. There was a clan living on the island. It was the Chu clan that issued the mission. The Chu clan had a long history. 3,000 years ago, they lived on Pan Shan Island. Even though they knew that there were many demonic beasts in the ancient water lake, they had never thought of leaving and had always lived there. On the other hand, there would occasionally be some geniuses who were unwilling to be left out of the limelight. They would leave the ancient water lake and come to the bustling area, making a name for themselves. It was said that the Emerald Martial Palace had an inner disciple who came from the Chu family of the Pan Shan Island. Without thinking too much about it, Yichen tore off the mission slip and left the soaring cloud hull. At the foot of the mountain, a rider was galloping towards the north. 8 days later, Yichen came to the vicinity of the vast ancient water lake. Coincidentally, there was a small rundown restaurant on the shore, with 4 large black words written on the plaque with peeling paint. Ancient Water Restaurant. Getting off the horse, Yichen patted the horse's head. It took me 8 days to get here. I should replace you when I get back. You will suffer if you follow me anyway. It was shameful to waste time. The dark brown horse was reliable in the early stages, but in the later stages, it was powerless. 2,000 miles a day was of no use at all. Even if they rushed through the night, they would only be able to travel 3,000 miles a day. Yichen planned to go back and get a half-demon horse, the ghost-eyed jade lion, which could travel 3,300 miles a day. If they rushed through the night, 5,000 miles would not be a problem. The most important thing was that the half-demon horse had a strong physical strength. It could run continuously for 3 days and 3 nights without rest. After that, it only needed to rest for a night and it would be full of energy again. Young warrior, you are going to the ancient water lake, right? Why don't you come in and take a rest? The waiter saw a guest and greeted him enthusiastically. Yichen nodded. Take care of my horse. All right, this way please. The restaurant was more dilapidated than he had imagined. The walls were mottled, the tables were rough and uneven, and even the chairs were pieced together. It looked very shabby. Choosing a chair that was pleasing to the eye, Yichen sat down and ordered a few dishes. While he was eating, the sound of horse hooves unexpectedly came from outside the restaurant. Good luck today, another guest. The waiter immediately became energetic. After a while, a young man dressed in green walked in. Seeing Yichen, the young man in green frowned. You are an inner disciple of the Sky Cloud Martial School. Are you going to the ancient water lake Pan Shan Island? Yes. Yichen could tell that the young man was an inner disciple of the Emerald Martial Palace. Then you don't need to go. The Chu family's business should be handled by the Chu family. Yichen raised his eyebrows. You are a disciple of the Chu family. The 166th generation disciple of the Chu family, Chu Ming. The young man in green sat down at a table opposite to Yichen. Sorry, since I have accepted the task, I will try my best. Yichen did not intend to give up the task. Chu Ming sneered, I am reminding you that there is no boat to cross the ancient water lake. It is 450 miles of waterway from here to the Pan Shan Island. If you are not careful, you will be dragged into the water by the beasts and die without a whole body. Moreover, the 9 twists and 18 turns are even more dangerous. Everything is dangerous. How can you achieve great things by being timid? The two did not have any conflict. After all, not every disciple of the Emerald Martial Palace was arrogant and annoying. On the shore of the ancient water lake, the lake water was surging and sparkling. At a glance, the sky and the water were like a line. Chu Ming glanced at Yi Chen and took out a waist-thick, 1-meter-long piece of wood from his storage ring. The wood was shot more than a dozen feet away, drawing a white water mark on the lake. It was extremely fast, but Chu Ming was even faster. He didn't make any movements, but he was faster. Before the wood fell into the water, he had already stepped on it. He rode on the wood as if it was nothing, and after a while, he became a small dot. Using a piece of wood as a boat. Yi Chen nodded and looked around. Soon, he found a small forest hundreds of meters away, in which there were many 3 to 4 meters tall trees. A sword light flashed and a big tree fell down. Yi Chen was afraid of being attacked by beasts on the way, so he cut a dozen more pieces of wood. Each piece was the same thickness and weighed hundreds of pounds. Coming to the shore, Yi Chen did the same thing, threw the wood out and stood on it. The scenery on both sides quickly passed by. Yi Chen felt that he had never been so happy before. For a moment, he felt that the sky was high and the earth was wide. He was like a bird, free and unrestrained. The wood had lost its momentum. Yi Chen activated his Jin Qi and spurted it out from the back of the wood, becoming the source of power. Whoosh! Whoosh! Although he did not catch up with Chu Ming, his speed was not slow. In addition, it was good to step on the wood and enjoy the scenery of the lake. After walking for dozens of miles, under the water behind the log, a huge shadow was following them silently. Chapter 96. The ancient water lake is indeed full of dangers. Yi Chen looked at the surface of the water in front of him and heard the rapid sound of water splashing. Many shuttle-like strange fish swooped up. The strange fish was more than 3 feet long, and its entire body was covered in dark green scales. Its pectoral and pelvic fins were very long and wide, like the wings of a bird. They flapped violently as it flew at an extremely fast speed. Chi 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 chi. While flying, the fish opened its mouth and shot out 2-inch-long venomous stingers, covering the entire area. Although Yi Chen did not know what kind of fish it was, he knew that its poisonous stingers were not to be underestimated. Who knew if it could kill a condensing reality realm warrior within a second? Of course, after reaching the 4th stage of the pure jade body boosting spell, the poisonous stingers would not be able to penetrate his defense. However, Yi Chen did not plan to be passive. Activating his protective aura, he shattered the densely packed poisonous thorns. Clang! The hidden cloud sword was unsheathed and flashed 4 times in the air. The next moment, 4 cross-shaped sword lights shot out and sliced the school of strange fish into pieces. Blood rained everywhere. Before the previous wave subsided, another wave arose. Suddenly, a huge wave rose behind him. In the wave, a huge monster snake was faintly discernible. Its demonic aura soared into the sky, stirring up vortexes one after another. This time, Yi Chen recognized the species of this strange snake. It was a peak level 4 demonic beast, water-splitting python. It was extremely strong and had the innate ability to call the wind and summon the rain. In addition to the demonic beast's inner Dan, it could also form a water-splitting Dan. If a martial artist wore it on their body and used their Shin Qi to stimulate it, it would be enough to double their speed in water. It was a rare treasure. Hiss! The anaconda opened its bloody mouth and shot out a thick pillar of grayish-white water. Yi Chen's brows slightly wrinkled. He waved the hidden cloud sword in his hand, and a clear sword mark appeared in the air. Then, a condensed sword light flew out. Walala! The water column exploded, and it started to rain heavily. Yi Chen stood still. Before the raindrops could even come within 3 feet of him, they were sliced into nothingness by the protective aura. Seeing that the water column could not do anything to Yi Chen, the anaconda looked up to the sky and hissed. The ferocious demon aura rushed up to the sky, causing a drastic change in the chi of heaven and earth. Large dark clouds suddenly gathered in the low sky. It was so dark that it made people panic. At the same time, a strong wind blew above the ancient water lake and the undercurrent surged, stirring up waves after waves. A normal peak level 4 demonic beast shouldn't be this strong. Could it be that this anaconda has the bloodline of an ancient demonic beast? That would be surprising. As far as Yi Chen knew, it was true that a peak level 4 demonic beast could summon a gale. However, it was very difficult to cause a small-scale change in the sky. It was almost impossible. Only a level 5 demonic beast could cause such a big movement. The wood under his feet moved up and down in the undercurrent. Yi Chen snorted coldly, raised his right foot and stomped down. Buzz! Ripples spread out one after another, and the surface of the water within a radius of 100 feet calmed down. Abruptly, the anaconda let out a miserable howl, and its huge body was thrown up, as if it had suffered a heavy blow. After a few blinks of an eye, the anaconda's wriggling body returned to the surface of the water, but it was not hurt. Instead, it became extremely angry. Its long body rolled and slapped, and its 4 to 5 feet long tail broke through the water waves, violently whipping towards Yi Chen, leaving a series of afterimages. Yi Chen's expression was completely dignified. In addition to stabilizing the wood with his foot, he also used the secret skill he got from the Bloody Butcher, Earth Explosion and Sky Shock. The hidden force quietly attacked the anaconda from the bottom of the water. He thought that even if he could not kill it, he could at least injure it a little and make it retreat. But now it seemed that the power of Earth Explosion and Sky Shock could not break its defense at all. The tail, which was as thick as a water tank, whipped over. The sharp airflow was like a knife. Without thinking, Yi Chen jumped up into the air. Crack! Like a stick hitting tofu, the wood was instantly smashed into pieces. In the air, Yi Chen took a deep breath, waved the hidden cloud sword in his hand 4 times, and 4 mountain-like sword chi slashed down, respectively locking on the anaconda's head, neck, abdomen, and tail. Clang! 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 Except for the tail, the other 3 parts were all hit. But even with the sharpness of the sword chi, it could only break the snake's scales, and barely reached its insides. Gray-red blood suddenly dyed the surface of the lake red, spreading out like ink. The anaconda was really in pain this time. It looked up to the sky and hissed, and its gray-green eyes turned scarlet, looking strange and cruel. It opened its bloody mouth, and a whirlpool gathered in its throat. Then, a half-meter thick spiral water column rushed out, and compressed again in the middle, becoming as thick as a thigh, and shot towards Yi Chen like a laser. Not good, this beast is too strong, I can't do anything to it. Yi Chen's expression changed. The thigh-thick spiral water column was too fast, and he couldn't borrow any momentum in the air, so he had no time to dodge. He could only throw a punch at the water column. In the sky-shaking sound, a huge semicircle was formed on the surface of the lake, about 10 meters deep. Compared to it, Yi Chen's body was like a slightly bigger insect, so small. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth, and Yi Chen was slightly injured. The anaconda was not much better. Its huge body rolled a few times in the water, and it was dizzy. It couldn't send out a second spiral water column. I'll take the parting water pill next time, I should go to Pan Shan Island first. After making up his mind, Yi Chen didn't want to continue fighting with the anaconda. He stepped back, and the rainwater in the air bent into an amazing arc, like a pulled bowstring. Of course, this was not a bowstring, but the rainwater that Yi Chen condensed, and turned into something that could be borrowed to increase the initial momentum. Swoosh! With his arms wide open, Yi Chen was like a white crane, and in a flash, he left the area and swept towards the center of the ancient water lake. After half a day, Yi Chen, who had been traveling for a long time, finally saw a huge island. The island was circular, and there were winding roads around it. On the top of the island, other than a mountain, there was a continuous ancient building complex. With a bitter smile, Yichen said to himself, Chu Ming should have arrived long ago. After all, he is more familiar with the ancient water lake than I am, and can avoid some dangers in advance. Shaking his head, Yichen activated his qi, and the wood under his feet moved forward at a faster speed. On the island, Yichen didn't fly up the mountain directly, because that was not a polite behavior. Following the path, Yichen came to the main road of Pan Shan, where there were 4 men guarding. Who are you? The yellow-faced man shouted coldly. Yichen cupped his fists and said, You guys, I am an inner disciple of the Flowing Cloud sect, and I am here for a mission. What proof do you have? The man asked. Yichen thought of the inner disciple token, and quickly took it out and threw it into the man's hand. The man carefully looked at it, and after confirming that there was no mistake, he returned the token, and politely said, I have offended you just now, Hero Yi, please follow me up the mountain. Yichen nodded and followed behind. Chapter 97. The coiling mountain avenue was clearly 10,000 feet long, but now it was stretched to hundreds of thousands of feet. According to the yellow-faced man, no matter who it was, if they wanted to reach the top of the mountain, they had to walk along the coiling mountain avenue. As for why, the yellow-faced man didn't know. Perhaps it was a custom that had been passed down for thousands of years. With their amazing speed, they arrived at the top of the mountain in less than half an hour. As far as the eye could see, the flat mountain top was covered with ancient buildings. Behind the buildings, there was a small green mountain that was less than 100 feet high. A beautiful waterfall fell straight down into the small pond in the middle of the buildings, splashing water everywhere. What a beautiful place! Yichen was secretly amazed. He was used to seeing big cities and mountains. Now that he was on this island, he felt refreshed. Walking along the ancient stone road, Yichen followed the man with a yellow face to the big house in the middle of the buildings. Master, the person outside is an inner disciple of the Sky Cloud Martial School. The man with a yellow face said loudly. Let him in. An old voice came out. Hearing this, Yichen stepped into the hall of the house. An old man in his 70s was sitting in the main seat of the hall. His skin was yellow like the man with a yellow face, but it did not look like he was malnourished, it seemed like he was born this way. Sitting next to him was a young man in green, it was Chu Ming who had arrived before Yichen. Chu Ming saw that Yichen could come to the Pan Shan Island, he was a little surprised. Walking to the center of the hall, Yichen cupped his fists, I am Yichen, an inner disciple of the Sky Cloud Martial School. Nice to meet you, Master Chu. The old man nodded, you received a mission and came here, right? Yes. That's good. With 2 disciples, we have a better chance of finding the lost ship. Yichen will try his best. While talking, Yichen was confused. He carefully sensed the old man's cultivation level and found that he was only at Mortal Realm Stage 7. He could not help but ask, Master Chu, on the way here, I noticed that all the people in the Chu family are below the condensing reality realm. What is going on? He didn't think that a family couldn't produce a condensing reality realm warrior. Chu Ming was a good example. In the future, he might also step into the clasping yuan realm and become a martial artist. The old man sighed. Find a seat first. Yichen sat on the chair opposite Chu Ming, wanting to hear what he had to say. It's not that our Chu family doesn't have any condensing reality realm warriors, it's just that we don't have any condensing reality realm warriors. Any warrior who has reached the condensing reality realm, if they stay on Pan Shan Island for more than 3 months, would suddenly meet with an unexpected calamity, or be attacked by demonic beasts, or become possessed by evil spirits, and disappear without a trace. Therefore, when Chu Ming reached the condensing reality realm, I asked him to leave Pan Shan Island. The elder said slowly. There's such a thing. Yichen gasped. Chu Ming said lightly, that's true. 15 years ago, my father died of qi deviation without any warning. The hall was silent for a moment. Yichen said again, then why didn't the whole family leave Pan Shan Island? The outside world is so big, there would be a place for the Chu family. The story starts from 3,000 years ago. At that time, the ancient water lake was not called the ancient water lake, it was called the Green Lake. Our Chu family lived on the shore of the Green Lake, there was no Pan Shan Island. However, ever since one of our clansmen found an ancient object in a cave at the bottom of the Green Lake, things changed. First, there was a huge earthquake in a radius of 1,000 miles, causing the terrain to change, forming a huge crater. Then, there was a thunderstorm that lasted for 3 months, almost completely submerging the Chu clan and everything around it. On the brink of life and death, an island descended from the sky, suppressing the cave at the bottom of the Green Lake. Our Chu clan's ancestors believed that the gods were merciful and gave the Chu clan a way out. Thus, the entire clan moved to the island. This island is today's Pan Shan Island. After recalling for a while, the old man continued, but things are not so simple. After moving to Pan Shan Island, all the warriors above the mortal realm died one by one within 3 months. At that time, the patriarch with the highest cultivation level, the ancestor of our Chu family, finally said some information before he died. What did he say? Yichen found himself deeply attracted. The old man used all the strength in his body and said word by word, devil, curse, just these 4 words. Devil, curse. Yichen suddenly felt a tingling sensation on his back, the pores on his body stood up. These 4 words seemed to have a great magical power, even saying it out loud was enough to make people tremble. Chu Ming's face was also not looking good. Every time he heard these 4 words, he would feel a kind of fear, deeply imprinted in his blood, unable to get rid of, unable to forget. The old man smiled bitterly, is it very scary? Yichen did not try to be brave, he nodded and said yes. When I first heard these 4 words, I was even more afraid than you were. I couldn't sleep for a month, I always felt like there were shadows around me, like there were ghosts roaring. But then I became numb, because as long as we don't reach the condensing reality realm, we Chu family are still normal people, we won't die for no reason. Hearing this, Yichen looked at the old man again, the old man had not explained his previous doubts. The old man continued, it's not that we didn't think about moving the whole family, it's just that we couldn't do it. Before the ancestor died, he told everyone to leave Pan Shan Island, not to stay here. The others all obeyed, and were divided into 3 groups, ready to leave one by one. But what made people desperate was that only one of the first group survived, the others also suddenly met with an unexpected disaster, and it was even more terrible than those who died on Pan Shan Island. The only survivor was scared out of his wits, and after returning to Pan Shan Island, he died within 3 years. Couldn't leave Pan Shan Island? But what happened to Chu Ming? No, only one of the first group survived. Although he died later, it was due to a mental breakdown, it should have nothing to do with the curse. In other words, only one person could leave Pan Shan Island safely, and not be threatened by the curse. This could be explained as there were 50 ways of living, 49 ways of living. If a person escaped, the heavens would always leave a chance of survival, not to mention an entire family, hundreds of thousands of people. At that moment, countless thoughts flashed through Yi Chen's mind. After a few decades, some of the younger generation of the family didn't believe it, and prepared to move again, but the number of people was much smaller, only a few dozen. Without exception, as long as one left Pan Shan Island for 500 miles, only one survived, the others all died tragically. No one could explain why. The old man's voice sounded a little tired. Yichen more or less understood the ins and outs of the whole thing, but he didn't think that such a beautiful place could have such a terrible thing. An underwater cave, an island that fell from the sky, a cursed family, the whole thing was too horrifying and impossible to explain. Perhaps when he reached a certain level, he would be able to solve this mystery. Now, he didn't dare to act rashly, for fear of being infected by the curse of Pan Shan Island. At that time, he really wouldn't be able to leave Pan Shan Island, unless he killed Chu Ming. But he and Chu Ming weren't from the same family, even if he killed Chu Ming, he wouldn't be able to leave Pan Shan Island, unless he killed Chu Ming. Chapter 98. Just as Yi Chen was lost in his thoughts, the elder looked at him and said, "If there is nothing else, can we go to the 9 bends and 18 bends to look for the lost ship? My granddaughter is still on the ship, it has been half a month. Although there is enough food on the ship, accidents are inevitable." Chu Ming stood up and said, "Don't worry Grandpa, leave it to me. I will definitely bring Xianing back. Since there are people on the ship, let's go now." Yi Chen also stood up. The elder nodded and said, "I will go with you, the Ironwood ship is ready." On the northwest coast of Pan Shan Island, a 15 meters long and 3 meters wide black wooden ship was docked there, its surface was glowing with a faint metallic luster. Yi Chen knew that this was the Ironwood ship. It was made of ironwood, which was comparable to metal. Needless to say, it was hard enough to withstand a full blow from a mortal realm warrior. It was also very flexible, able to move quickly in big waves without worrying about the hull breaking. "Master!" 12 mortal realm stage and 9 warriors of the Chu family stood in a row and said in unison. The elder waved his hand and said, "You all know Chu Ming. This is the inner disciple of the Sky Cloud Martial School, Yi Chen. He will go with us to the 9 bends and 18 bends to rescue Xianing." After saying that, he turned to Yi Chen and Chu Ming and said, "They are not as strong as you two, but they are good swimmers, they can hold their breath underwater for 15 minutes. Yi Chen was a little surprised. With his current cultivation, holding his breath underwater for 15 minutes was not difficult, but these 12 people were only at Mortal Realm Stage 9. The closer they got to the 9 bends and 18 bends, the faster the current became. Waves after waves of water hit the side of the Ironwood ship, making loud banging sounds. Inside the cabin, the old man said, "The 9 bends and 18 bends are very complicated, with countless whirlpools. Without exquisite rowing skills, it is impossible to pass through. If there are no accidents, this old man's granddaughter should be trapped in the first half of the 9 bends and 18 bends. There is a small mountain there, and the mountain and the lake have formed a flat beach for the boat to dock. What you need to do is very simple. Kill any demonic beasts that come close to prevent the boat from being pushed off course." Yi Chen said, "That's very simple. I can use my lightness skill to fly over, and I'll be able to find the lost ship and your granddaughter very quickly." The old man shook his head. The truly terrifying part of the 9 bends and 18 bends is not the flow of water or the demon beasts, but the thick fog. If one were to enter it alone, it would be very easy to get lost and not be able to come out for a lifetime. Only by following the changes in the flow of water would one be able to find a way out. "I see." Yi Chen nodded thoughtfully. Pan Shan Island and ancient water lake could not be treated with common sense. It was too strange. Creak. Suddenly, the Ironwood ship shook violently, as if it had been brushed by something. Dang dang dang, a martial artist of the Chu clan rushed in. "Clan head, 3 demon birds are approaching." The old man nodded. "Leave it to the 2 of them." Yi Chen and Chu Ming looked at each other and walked out of the cabin together. On the deck, Yi Chen looked up and saw 3 huge strange birds flying in the air. The strange birds had a wingspan of 5 meters, and the upper half of their wings had a pair of sharp claws. At this time, they had not yet approached the Ironwood ship, but the wind caused by the flapping of their wings had caused the Ironwood ship to shake. Star finger, 7 stars of the Big Dipper. Chu Ming raised the index and middle fingers of his right hand, and at the end of his fingertips, a glazed brilliance appeared. He pointed 7 times in the air, and drew the pattern of the 7 stars of the Big Dipper. Poochie, 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 without any suspense, the 3 demon birds were shrouded by the 7 stars of the Big Dipper. Several bloody holes appeared on their bodies, and they fell into the lake. Yi Chen smiled and said, "Good finger technique. Insignificant skill." Chu Ming withdrew his hand. At this moment, a Chu family martial artist shouted, "We have arrived at the 9 bends and 18 bends. Everyone hold on to the fixed objects, so as not to be thrown out of the deck." The voice fell, and in the blink of an eye, the hull of the ship suddenly swayed, and there was a tendency to capsize. The other Chu family martial artists were already prepared, and firmly held on to the things that they could hold on to. Only Yi Chen and Chu Ming were indifferent. Their feet firmly stepped on the deck, and no matter how fiercely the ship shook, it was difficult to shake their bodies. Chu Ming's body was very flexible, and his balance was also very good. He seemed to be motionless, but in fact, his body was secretly making subtle changes in the direction of the hull, and he could always take advantage of the situation. But when he looked at Yi Chen, his eyes could not help but narrow. Yi Chen stood with his hands behind his back, and his feet seemed to be rooted to the ground, swaying with the hull of the ship. It was as if he was a part of the hull, and there was no possibility of him being thrown out. What a brilliant Qing Gong! Chu Ming's eyesight was very powerful, and he immediately saw that Yi Chen's attainments in Qing Gong were very high, and his use of Jin Qi was far beyond that of ordinary martial artists. Yi Chen faintly smiled, and was about to speak, when he suddenly frowned and said, "There is a demon beast sneaking over from under the water." His figure jumped, and Yi Chen's body fell on the side of the ship's railing, and his fist with a shining blue light blasted down. Roar! The tiger's roar shook the sky, and the blue Qi dragon swooped down, drilling into the bottom of the water. The next moment, the huge corpse of the demon beast floated up, and there was a bathtub-sized hole in its chest and abdomen, and blood was gurgling out. Chu Ming looked at the corpse of the demon beast, and was surprised. The water shadow beast is good at hiding its demon qi, and is proficient in stealth. How did you detect it? If it wasn't for Yi Chen's discovery, Chu Ming believed that it was impossible to kill the water shadow beast in advance. Only when the opponent launched an attack and exposed its demon qi, would he be able to detect it. At that time, even if the Ironwood ship was undamaged, it would definitely deviate from the course, and it would take a lot of effort to return to the normal route, which would undoubtedly waste a lot of time. Yi Chen naturally wouldn't say that his soul power was strong, and that he could freely explore anything around him, so he casually made up a reason and said, although the water shadow beast is proficient in stealth, and its demon qi is restrained, but with its huge body, it is difficult to sneak over without a sound, and it will inevitably change the water flow. Chu Ming secretly nodded. What Yi Chen said was right. The bigger the body, the greater the resistance in the water. But Yi Chen's perception was too strong, and he could even see the subtle changes in the water flow, which was really admirable. As they gradually went deeper into the 9 twists and 18 turns, the frequency of the hull shaking became faster and faster. Sometimes it was clearly swaying to the left, but suddenly it jumped up, and sometimes it was clearly stable without any waves, but the whirlpool under the water made it difficult for the hull to move. From fast speed to a sudden stop, it could almost make an ordinary person's heart jump out. Finally, the Ironwood ship arrived in front of the half-submerged mountain. On the beach, a large ship was docked there, and it seemed to be faintly discernible in the thick fog, and there was a dead silence. The ship had not yet approached, but Chu Ming and Yi Chen's feet touched the deck, and like 2 big birds, they flew over at an incredible speed. Pa pa! The two stood on the deck of the lost ship, and felt that the atmosphere had changed. Xianing! Are you there? Chu Ming called out. Whoosh! Whoosh! Except for the lake wind, there was no other sound. The two were afraid of missing something, so they pushed open the cabin door and went in. After a moment, the two came out again. Yi Chen looked up at the mountain, and said to Chu Ming, maybe they went to the mountain to take refuge. Chu Ming nodded, that's the only possibility. Let's wait for Big Grandpa first. Chapter 99. The Ironwood boat docked, and the old man came over with 12 people. Chu Ming said, Grandpa, Xianing is not up there. Not up there. The old man's face changed, he turned to the Chu warriors and said, you 12 people, 4 people in a group, divide into 3 groups and go up the mountain. Yes, Lord. The 12 Chu warriors formed their own groups and went up the mountain from 3 directions. At this time, Yi Chen said, Lord Chu, you and Chu Ming in a group, I can go alone. That's it. The old man did not underestimate Yi Chen. Along the way, Yi Chen's strength was no less than Chu Ming, who was at the late condensing reality realm. After they parted ways, Yichen followed the most remote path and flew up the mountain. On his way up the mountain, poison water scorpion that loved water rushed towards him, but was easily smashed into pieces by his fist power. Liquid splashed everywhere, but he did not slow down at all. After a dozen breaths, he had disappeared into the depths of the mountain that was covered in thick fog. The fog silently parted, and a figure flashed like a ghost. Every time his feet touched the ground, he would slide dozens of meters away. His breath was long and pure. All of a sudden, the mountain near Yichen started to move. It was actually a giant rock beast with a rock-like outer shell. It opened its deep mouth, and an arm-thick red shadow flew out towards Yichen at lightning speed. Courting death. The hidden cloud sword was unsheathed, and the sharp sword light collided with the red shadow. Clang! The red shadow was cut open, and yellow-brown blood spurted out. Looking carefully, it turned out to be a 10 feet long tongue. The root of the tongue was still in the mouth of the rock beast. It was like a frog sticking out its tongue. The beast wanted to use its tongue to roll Yichen into its mouth. It was really insidious. Missing its attack, the rock beast's body shrank back and squeezed into the mountain to avoid Yichen's counterattack. How could Yichen let it go? He stamped his foot on the ground and released his power. Bang! The rock beast was forcibly blown out. The sword chi flashed, and the giant rock beast with an extremely high defense fell to the ground. Its abdomen was cut open, and its internal organs and intestines rolled out. The strong earthy smell was extremely pungent. Not interested in dissecting the corpse of the giant rock beast, Yichen didn't even look back as he flashed into the thick fog. The mountain peak wasn't big, so Yichen quickly arrived at the mountainside. The first thing that came into view was a stone bridge. Beneath the stone bridge, clouds and mist tumbled. It was unfathomably deep. On the other side of the stone bridge, there was a large flat ground. Behind the flat ground, there was a large stone door. It was 33 feet tall and 28 feet wide. The door was tightly shut, revealing only a small gap. Light shone out from inside, changing the color of the mist. There's someone inside. Yichen hesitated for a moment before stepping onto the stone bridge. Ka-la-la. Inconceivably, the stone beasts on both sides of the stone bridge came to life. They broke free from the stone surface and rushed towards Yichen step by step. Mountain range stacking. Facing the many stone beasts, Yichen used the lone peak of 13 swords attack range, the mountain range stacking. With a wave of his sword, layers of sword light spread out. Cha-cha-cha, one by one, the stone beasts were chopped into pieces and scattered all over the ground. Just as he was about to leave, Yichen discovered an amazing scene. The broken pieces of the stone beasts twisted a few times, turned into mist and blended into the surrounding environment, leaving no traces behind. Strange, this was really strange. Yichen's eyes flashed, no one knew what he was thinking. Moments later, Yichen took a deep breath, carried his sword and rushed towards the stone door. The stone door was really thick. Yichen estimated that even if he could break it, it might cause the stone room inside to collapse. It was not a wise move. Gathering 20,000 pounds of strength in both of his arms, Yichen inserted both of his hands into the gap in the middle of the stone door and tried to pull it to both sides. Rumble. The stone door slowly opened, and a brightly lit hall appeared in front of Yichen. Compared to the outside, the hall inside was luxurious enough. On both sides of the hall, there were 18 gold-painted stone pillars. They were 26 meters tall, smooth and without any carvings. In the middle of the hall, there was a red carpet, which extended all the way to the main seat of the hall. A middle-aged man was sitting on the main seat, his eyes were slightly closed, and his aura was like a mountain. On both sides of the red carpet, there were 6 other middle-aged men. Although their auras were not as powerful as the middle-aged man, they were still not to be underestimated. They were at least at the peak of late condensing reality realm. Who are you? The middle-aged man on the main seat opened his eyes, which were shining like lightning. He was obviously a clasping Yuan realm warrior. Yichen cupped his fists and said, I am here to look for someone. I wonder if you have seen a young girl coming here. The middle-aged man on the main seat said lightly, come in and have a seat. Yes. Yichen felt that something was wrong, but he could not tell what it was. He followed the order and sat on the last seat on the right side of the red carpet. An evil look flashed through his eyes. The middle-aged man waved his hand at the stone door, and the stone door slowly closed. The young girl you are talking about is 15 or 16 years old, and clean. Yichen had already learned about his granddaughter's appearance and temperament from the elder. He nodded and said, indeed, have you seen her before? Yes, she was trapped at the foot of the mountain. I saved her. She is now in the side room. You can take her and leave now. The middle-aged man seemed to be easy to talk to. With a suspicious look in his eyes, Yichen asked to confirm, I can take her and leave? What? You don't want to take her? Oh, no. Yichen stood up and walked towards the side room of the hall unhurriedly. He pushed his soul power to its limit, just in case something unexpected happened. However, things were very strange. Not only did the middle-aged man on the main seat not move, even the other 6 middle-aged men on the side seemed to have their acupuncture points sealed. They sat there without moving or talking. There was only some meat on the table, which had not been eaten at all. A strange atmosphere filled the whole hall. When he reached the door of the side room, Yichen suddenly turned around and looked at the middle-aged man. The evil look in the middle-aged man's eyes quickly disappeared. He asked, what now? Nothing, I just think it's funny. Yichen pulled out his sword and sneered. Ha! The middle-aged man said with a gloomy face, I have already given you enough face by letting you take the young girl away. Do you want to fight me? You are only a condensing reality realm warrior, I can easily kill you. Yichen said with a faint smile, really? If you can kill me, why would you lie to me? If I am not wrong, once you enter the side room, you will die. How dare you? Get the hell in here. The middle-aged man waved his hand, and a golden stone pillar fell from the ground. Without any hesitation, it shot towards Yichen, who was not far away. It created a thunderous sound in the air, which was unstoppable. After all, this stone pillar was 66 feet long and half a meter thick. With the help of a clasping Yuan realm warrior's Jinqi, it was more powerful than any weapon. It could easily pierce through a mountain and kill a late condensing reality realm warrior. At this moment, if it was an ordinary warrior, he would definitely retreat into the side room to avoid the attack of the stone pillar. However, Yichen was not one of them. His eyes were clear, and he did not intend to dodge at all. He held the hidden cloud sword in his right hand and pointed it at the terrifying stone pillar. Crack! The stone pillar shattered into pieces, turning into mist and dissipating. Chapter 100. Mountain Condensing Sword Qi. After breaking the stone pillar, Yichen's eyes flickered with a cold light. He waved a half-moon-shaped sword Qi towards the middle-aged man. Puff! The middle-aged man did not expect that Yichen would not retreat or dodge. Instead, he attacked him after breaking the stone pillar. Before he could react, the sword Qi landed on his body. The mist rolled, and the shape of the middle-aged chief changed rapidly. He turned from a human into a lizard-like monster, with 4 dark red sarcomas on his head. It was extremely disgusting. It opened its big mouth, and everything in the hall turned into mist and was swallowed into its stomach. Yichen looked around. This was not a luxurious hall at all, it was a dirty stone cave. The 6 middle-aged men, who were neither smiling nor talking, were just skeletons sitting there. The color of their bones had turned black. In addition, there were a lot of white bones piled up on the ground, extending all the way to the main seat. It was the red carpet they had seen before. Looking back, the side room was also a stone cave. It was a few meters in size, and there was a huge pit at the bottom. The pit was filled with a gray liquid, and sticky bubbles were rising from it. When the bubbles burst, the air that was stored in the liquid touched the cave wall and corroded it, leaving a large area of black marks. Although he knew that everything before was just an illusion, Yichen still could not help but gasp. If he had not noticed it in advance, he would have stepped into the gray liquid and died. What was more horrifying was that if he had guessed it right, this lizard-like monster should be a rare Shin beast on the true spirit continent. It liked to suck people's brains and turn their memories into its own. Then, it would refine a kind of Shin Qi according to the memories in its mind and arrange a vivid illusion, making it hard for people to tell which was real and which was fake. Shin beasts were demonic beasts that could evolve. According to the number of sarcomas on their heads, their strength could be distinguished. One sarcoma-like demonic beast was a rank 1 beast, 2 were rank 2, and 4 were rank 4 beasts. However, Yichen was not afraid of it. Among the demonic beasts of the same level, Shin beasts were the weakest kind, so there was nothing to be afraid of. Where is the girl? Yichen stared at the Shin beast. The Shin beast growled, its small eyes filled with malice. Yichen frowned and remembered that the sea serpent could not speak. Only in the illusion did people think that it could speak. In fact, it had not spoken from the beginning to the end. Everything was based on the atmosphere and its own imagination. Since that's the case, there's no need for you to stay. The previous sword strike had already injured the sea serpent, causing it to lose control of the sea serpent chi. Yichen was not afraid that it would use the sea serpent chi again. He stamped his feet and released his hidden force. Immediately, 3 sword chi flew out in a triangular formation. Boom! The sea serpent flew high in the air under the explosion of the hidden force, and forcibly withstood the 3 sword chi. Fiercely hitting the cave wall, the sea serpent suddenly opened its mouth and spat out a wisp of fog. This wisp of fog turned into a ball of fire in the air, burning towards Yichen. Watch me destroy your mirage. Yichen didn't dare to face the fire directly. He was afraid that it might be a trap. He switched the hidden cloud sword to his left hand and launched the first style of the tyrant fist, tyrannical rampage. All of a sudden, the fire was integrated into the sword and rushed towards the sea serpent. A horrifying scream sounded. There was a bloody hole in the chest and abdomen of the sea serpent. The edge of the bloody hole was pitch black, and a disgusting burnt smell spread out, making people want to vomit. It's really a trap. The tyrant fist itself had no attribute, but it could be integrated into the opponent's attack. At this time, the sea serpent was clearly suffering from its own actions. However, Yichen didn't know that the sea serpent's mirage contained 5 elements of Yuan Qi. Fire Yuan Qi was one of them. That fire was the essence of the fire in its body. It was very difficult to condense it again. Just now, it was afraid that it couldn't kill Yichen, so it used the sea serpent Qi to cover up the existence of the fire. Then, it took back the sea serpent Qi, which was easy to give people the illusion that it was an illusion. As long as Yichen was not careful, there was a high possibility that he would fail miserably. The intelligence of this monster was not inferior to that of humans. In terms of insidiousness and cunning, most humans were no match for it. Yichen's pupils shrank, and his heart was filled with killing intent. This sea serpent must not be left alive, otherwise, there would be endless disasters. Die! With a low shout, Yichen threw out a punch and a sword at the same time. Crack! Bang! Like a broken sack, the sea serpent collapsed on the ground, motionless. However, Yichen was afraid that it was not enough, so he continued to attack until the sea serpent was no longer in its beast form. Walking to the corpse of the sea serpent, Yichen reached out his hand and a fist-sized inner pellet was sucked out. The surface of the inner pellet was white, and there was a mist overflowing from it. Just looking at it would easily make people hallucinate. Taking out a slightly larger jade box from his storage ring, Yichen put the inner pellet into it. Putting away the jade box, Yichen let out a sigh of relief. He looked around, hoping to find some clues. Previously, in the illusion, the sea serpent had described the characteristics of the granddaughter of the elder, so he should have seen her before. He wondered if she was in danger or not. If she was in danger, there was nothing he could do. After all, it had been too long. The sea serpent was not a herbivorous monster. It specialized in sucking human brains. Something was not right. Yichen suddenly shook his head. The sea serpent could not speak, so everything that happened in the illusion did not count. But, how did it know the characteristics of the granddaughter of the elder? Could it be that those were my own memories? The sea serpent made me hallucinate and said the answers I wanted to know. In other words, no matter who it was, as long as they were in the illusion, there would not be any loopholes in their words, because the questions I wanted to ask have already been answered. With a bitter smile, Yichen had to admit defeat to the sea serpent. If it were not for the fact that he had doubts in his heart and his unusually strong soul power, he would have been tricked by the sea serpent. After a careful search and finding no clues, Yichen immediately walked out of the cave. Outside the cave, the ground was a wasteland full of weeds. The stone bridge was just a fallen boulder. As for the gully, it was real, and below it was a lake. Following the way he came, Yichen went down the mountain. After a while, the lost ship appeared in front of him. There were more than 10 people standing there, including a girl in a yellow dress. The girl was beautiful and had a clean temperament. If he was not mistaken, the girl was the granddaughter of the old man, Chu Xining. Young hero Yi, my granddaughter has been found. The old man smiled. Yichen touched his nose, that's good. Chu Ming asked, nothing happened on your side, right? No, nothing happened. Yichen did not intend to complicate matters. Anyway, the purpose of the other party was to find Chu Xining, so there was no need to mention the sea serpent. That's good, let's go back. It's getting late. The old man nodded. The lost ship was abandoned in place. Everyone boarded the ironwood ship and sailed along the route they came from. On the way back, the number of demon beasts did not decrease, but because it was close to evening, it became more dangerous. Fortunately, Yi Chen and Chu Ming protected the ironwood ship and did not let it deviate from the route. When the last ray of sunlight faded, everyone had already returned to Pan Shan Island. It was a quiet night. The next morning, Yi Chen said goodbye to everyone. As for Chu Ming, it was rare for him to come back, so he planned to stay for a few more days. After all, the curse of Pan Shan Island generally occurred between the second and third month. There was no danger in the first and second month, and Chu Ming had only been back for a day. On the ancient water lake, the water was sparkling. A person stepped on a tree trunk and rushed forward. In June, the inner disciple ranking competition will be held. I wonder what kind of powerful characters will be among the top 10 inner disciples. Yi Chen's white robe fluttered in the wind. While looking at the lake scenery, he was thinking. Chapter 101. Half a day later, Yi Chen came back to the shore. What happened next made him speechless. The owner and the waiter of the ancient water lake had disappeared without a trace. As for his and Chu Ming's horses, of course, they were gone too. Both of them were riding on dark brown horses. Each horse was worth more than 60,000 silvers, which added up to 120,000 silvers, which was enough for an ordinary person to live comfortably for 10 lifetimes. If they didn't want to live an ordinary life, they could buy a small manor, become a master, and have 3 wives and 4 concubines, and countless maids. In short, if there were no disasters in this life, they could have everything. I hope you guys are always lucky and don't run into me again. Yi Chen didn't care about a dark brown horse, but he hated people who took advantage of others. If he ran into them, he wouldn't mind sending them to jail for the rest of their lives. With a flash, Yi Chen flew away on foot. In the ancient spring town. In the Flower Fairy restaurant. The owner of the restaurant was a beautiful young woman, who was not even 25 years old. Her husband was a famous sword artist in the surrounding area, and she herself was a lake condensing reality realm warrior, who was known as the Flower Fairy. Ever since she started running the restaurant, her business had been booming, and she was not any less famous than her husband. On the second floor of the restaurant, a lot of martial artists were sitting there, drinking and chatting. From time to time, they would flirt with the lady boss. Lady boss, your husband hasn't fought for a few years, I wonder how good his sword art is now. Someone used her husband's name to talk to the flower fairy. The flower fairy said with a faint smile, I'm not sure about this, but according to him, he can cut the golden water river in half with one sword attack. Cut the golden water river in half with one sword attack. These martial artists looked at each other. The golden water river was a big river near the ancient spring town. The widest part was hundreds of meters, and the narrowest part was also hundreds of meters. Even if he cut the narrowest part with one sword attack, it would still be a big deal. In addition to his powerful sword art, his cultivation was at least at the peak of early clasping Yuan realm, or even mid-clasping Yuan realm. The flower fairy took in everyone's expressions and nodded in satisfaction. Ever since she came to the Blossom Immortal restaurant, countless people had drooled over her beauty. If it wasn't for her husband's fame and strength, there would have been people who would have tried to snatch her away. It was necessary to teach them a lesson. You found a good husband. Reaching such a realm at the age of 26 is enough to be mentioned in the same breath as the disciples of the sections. No. As the flower fairy spoke, her gaze landed on the seat next to the window. There sat a young man in a white robe. His features were delicate and handsome. At this moment, someone said, June is almost here, the Sky Cloud Martial School's inner disciple competition is about to begin. To be honest, I would like to go and have a look. I want to see it too. Too bad no one invited me. Invite you? Dream on. Even some clasping Yuan realm martial artists weren't invited, not to mention you. Unless you are a relative of one of the Sky Cloud Martial School's inner elders, that would be quite possible. I'm just saying. By the way, Flower Fairy, has your husband been invited? The Flower Fairy nodded. The invitation letter arrived 10 days ago, but my husband is currently in seclusion, so I don't know if he can make it in time. Her husband's name was Song Qingyun, known as the Blue Cloud Sword Artist. He reached the clasping Yuan realm at the age of 21. His sword art was extremely sharp, and he was quite famous in the Windy Nation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been invited by the Sky Cloud Martial School to watch the inner disciple competition. TSK, it's a great honor to be invited by the Sky Cloud Martial School. But with the reputation of the Blue Cloud Sword Artist, it's normal for him to be invited. In our area, besides the Blue Cloud Sword Artist, only that old kidnapper and the 5 Mountain Master Pei Zhongli have been invited. Pei Zhongli, isn't that the father of Pei Shaoqing, one of the top 10 inner disciples of the Sky Cloud Martial School? Yes, the Pei family is the #1 family within hundreds of miles, and that Pei Shaoqing is also very good. He became an outer disciple at the age of 12, an inner disciple at 13, and now he is only 16, but he is already one of the top 10 inner disciples of the Sky Cloud Martial School, ranked in the top 5. Pei Shaoqing, this kid is indeed very good. But don't be fooled by his friendly attitude, he is not friendly when fighting, he is very cruel. If there are no accidents, this kid has the possibility to be in the top 3, maybe he can even fight for the first place. Not necessarily, Pei Shaoqing's good friend Ghost Sword Li Kuang should not be underestimated either. I heard that he had obtained a low-rank Earth Realm sword art 2 years ago. Even if he had only comprehended 60 to 70% of it, it would still be enough for him to look down on the others. Ghost Sword Li Kuang. The ears of the teenager in the white robe twitched slightly, he could clearly hear everyone's conversation. He did not care much about Pei Shaoqing, but he was interested in Ghost Sword Li Kuang. He had heard of this person before, he had a unique understanding of sword arts since he was young. His sword art was unpredictable, it was completely different from the normal sword arts. Therefore, he had never practiced the sword arts of the Sky Cloud Martial School until one day, when he accidentally obtained the inheritance of a deceased senior and learned a low-rank Earth Realm sword art, 9 Ghost Shadow Swords. With this sword art, his reputation skyrocketed, and he earned the title of Ghost Sword in the martial world. He could be considered as the #1 sword artist among the top 10 inner disciples. The handsome teenager was Yi Chen. After he lost his dark brown horse, his speed did not decrease, instead, it increased. He could travel more than 3,000 miles in a day, and this was because he was afraid that he would lose too much Jinqi, so he would rest for a while. The ancient spring town happened to be on his route, so he came to the Flower Fairy restaurant to rest. I have already touched the edge of the sword intent, but unfortunately, the lone peak of 13 swords is not that high ranked, so I am still at a disadvantage. I wonder what kind of rewards I will get from the inner disciple ranking competition. Yi Chen's strongest sword art was still the Tyrant Fist. Although the lone peak of 13 swords had the advantage of sword chi, it was still not as good as the ghost sword Li Kuang. As for Pei Shaoqing, it seemed that he was more famous than the ghost sword, but Yi Chen was more interested in people who use swords. The ghost sword is nothing. Among the top 10 inner disciples, who can compete with the blood shadow sword Meng Chong? He is the only disciple in the Sky Cloud Martial School who has completed the 1,000 kill. Even the core disciples could not do it. I am afraid that this year, he will not only be the #1 inner disciple, but he will also challenge the other core disciples. With his sword art, it should not be a problem for him to be in the top 15. That's true. Meng Chong's status as the #1 inner disciple is undeniable. The others can only compete for the 2nd to 10th place. Maybe there will be even more outstanding inner disciples who will compete with the top 10 inner disciples. It will be very intense. I will go find my brother-in-law tomorrow and ask for an invitation. He has a good relationship with one of the inner elders of the Sky Cloud Martial School, so there should be a chance. My cousin's teacher used to be in the Sky Cloud Martial School, I wonder if he can bring me. Everyone's heart was itching for an invitation. They could not wait to have an invitation right in front of them. At this time, Yi Chen had already finished his lunch. He threw down a silver ingot that weighed 10 silvers, stood up and walked through the crowd, heading downstairs. A Jianghu man accidentally saw the cloud pattern on Yi Chen's sleeve and said in a low voice, "I did not expect there to be an inner disciple of the Sky Cloud Martial School here. What a mistake." There were a lot of people in the Jianghu who wore white robes. Plus, Yi Chen had been traveling day and night for the past few days, so his robes were covered with dust. It did not look that eye-catching, so it did not attract much attention. Now that someone mentioned it, everyone realized that Yi Chen was indeed an inner disciple of the Sky Cloud Martial School. The Flower Fairy secretly smiled. She had already known about Yi Chen's identity. But seeing that he was only at the mid-condensing reality realm, she was afraid that it would not be possible for him to compete for the top 10 inner disciples. Of course, whether it was possible or not, she would find out when she went with her husband. She hoped that her husband would come out soon. Chapter 102. Being on the road for a couple of days was not without its benefits. At least, Yi Chen felt that his Jinqi had become a lot purer and easier to use. Of course, people who did not have a strong enough soul power would not be able to notice the subtle changes. After returning to the floating cloud palace, Yi Chen walked to the ranking wall. There was basically no change in the ranking this month. The ranking was still the same. As for why, it was very simple. Everyone was focused on the competition that was going to start in June. There was no need to work so hard right now. It would be more suitable to wait until the competition to amaze the world. Looking at the bottom, Yi Chen smiled. He was ranked last, and the few people who were in the same batch as him were all in the top row. Alright, I should take advantage of this competition to become one of the top 10 inner disciples, so that I won't have to challenge other people in the future. Yi Chen did not really care about the ranking in front of him. In the competition, everything was fair. You would not get any special treatment just because you had a high ranking. But right now, the most important thing for him was training. The mid-condensing reality realm was too low. He had to at least reach the peak of the mid-condensing reality realm. Then, he would not have to be afraid of anyone among the inner disciples. At night, Yi Chen sat down to cultivate. In the morning, Yi Chen sat on the cliff, training his sword intent. At noon, Yi Chen would go to the pool under the waterfall to train his body. As the days passed, it was getting closer and closer to June. Deep in the mountains behind the Windy Mountain. Next to the Rock Mountain. A burly young man with a height of 2 meters and a naked upper body stood there. His eyes were like lightning, and his muscles were bulging. His terrifying aura was even stronger than a beast of the same level. Anyone who was stared at by him would feel as if they were facing an ancient beast, and they would tremble in fear. Roar! The muscular young man opened his mouth and roared. The muscles on his upper body shook like a mountain. His bones also made a sound like a bow being pulled, as if dozens of people were shooting arrows at the same time. The ground cracked under his stomp. The muscular young man opened his arms and slammed into the rock mountain. Rumble! The 20 meters tall, 6 to 7 meters thick rock mountain was broken into pieces. Huge rocks that were as tall as a human flew in all directions. His face did not even blush. The muscular young man mumbled to himself, "The competition is about to start. I, Xiaoyi, will not be willing to be ranked below others. I will definitely fight for the first place. Once I become the #1 inner disciple, I will challenge Su Jing and see who is the strongest in the Sky Cloud Martial School." There were 36 mountains in the Sky Cloud Martial School, which were specially prepared for the inner masters to train. There were 36 mountains in the Sky Cloud Martial School. The white-robed elder said to the youth beside him, "Li Yun, as soon as you were promoted to an inner disciple, you became my disciple. In these 3 years, you have never gone out to do any missions or participate in the ranking competition. You have been concentrating on your cultivation, but this time, you must participate in the ranking competition. Otherwise, the sect leader and the other elders will think that I am delaying you and not giving you enough opportunities to train." The young man's expression was grave and stern as he said, "Master, don't worry. I will let others know that even if I have never been in Jianghu, I can still defeat other disciples." The white-robed elder shook his head, "Don't look down on others. Although your strength is enough to be in the top 5 of the inner disciples, it is still a bit dangerous to fight for the top 3. As far as I know, Ghost Sword Li Kuang and Pei Shaoqing both have the strength to be in the top 3. As for that Blood Shadow Blade Meng Chong, his fighting strength is so strong that even I, as an inner elder, am a bit surprised. I'm afraid you are still not his match." The cold-looking youth said, "Master, didn't you tell me that if I want to fight, I should fight for first place? Otherwise, everything else is meaningless." "Hee, that's what I've said." "Then do your best to fight for the first place. If I'm not mistaken, your biggest opponent will be the Blood Shadow Blade, Meng Chong, and your second opponent will be the Ghost Sword, Li Kuang. His sword art is unpredictable, unlike the Sky Cloud Martial School. You must be careful when you meet him, don't lose to him in sword art." "In terms of sword art, I will not lose to anyone." The white-robed elder nodded. Not to mention other things, in terms of sword art, there were not many people in the Sky Cloud Martial School who could compete with his disciple. After all, after 3 years of hard work, the young man already had his own style of sword art. If he was given time, he might not lose to the #1 disciple of the Sky Cloud Martial School, Hidden Fragrance Sword, Zhu Mei. "Alright, 3 months of closed-door training, let me see your current strength." Ding! The sword came out of the scabbard, and the cold-looking youth waved his sword towards the sea of clouds. Silently, 13 sword marks appeared in the sea of clouds. Each sword mark was the same length, and there was almost no difference between them. It was as if they were all copies of the same sword mark. The white-robed elder's eyes flashed with a surprised look, 14 sword lights. "I can't believe that your sword light has reached the highest level." If someone was here, they would definitely be confused. There were 13 sword marks in the sea of clouds, why were there 14 sword lights? Black Dragon River, Sunflower Water Tributary. In the last 3 months, a new small gang was established here, called the Sunflower Water Stronghold. The Sunflower Water Stronghold had 3 leaders, all of whom were at the peak of the condensing reality realm. Among them, the head leader had already touched the edge of the Clasping Yuan realm, and would only need 1 or 2 months to become a Clasping Yuan realm warrior. In addition, the Sunflower Water Stronghold also had 7 or 8 late condensing reality realm warriors, more than 20 mid-condensing reality realm warriors, and 40 to 50 early condensing reality realm warriors. As for the mortal realm warriors, they were basically cannon fodder, and there were also hundreds of them. The outer gate of the Sunflower Water stronghold was split in half with a bang, and an arrogant and wild young man walked in with big steps. People of the Sunflower Water stronghold, come out and die. Whoosh! There were at least 100 stronghold members surrounding the young man, and then there were dozens of elite stronghold members, all of whom were condensing reality realm warriors. Looking for death, you dare to accept the mission to destroy my Sunflower Water stronghold, kill him. With a command, the tall and sturdy young man was immediately drowned in the sea of people, and his figure could not be seen. Ha ha ha, all of you, die. The blood-red blade light crisscrossed in the sea of people, and everywhere it went, there would be dozens of people's bodies cut open, and blood splattered everywhere. There was simply no one who could withstand a single attack, no, not even a single attack, because even the condensing reality realm elite stronghold members could not block half of the power of the tall and sturdy young man's blade. How can he be so terrifying? Who is he? Ah, I know, he is the Sky Cloud Martial School's Blood Shadow Blade Meng Chong. Run quickly. Someone saw something from the tall and sturdy young man's blade art, and his face was full of fear. Slaughter the common people, die for me. The tall and sturdy young man laughed arrogantly, and the murderous intent in his laughter soared into the sky. Soon after, a mournful and terrifying blood-red blade light flashed, and every time the blade fell, there would be at least 10 people dead, and the ground would be cut open with a hideous blade mark. Blood flowed like a river, and the people of the Sunflower Water stronghold were almost all killed. At this moment, another 3 people rushed over. They were the 3 leaders of the Sunflower Water stronghold. The third leader's weapon was a pair of Xian flower axes, the second leader's weapon was the eyebrow staff, and the head leader's weapon was a tiger-headed blade, which was the most powerful. The tall and sturdy young man rushed out from the corpses, and slashed at the 3 people. Poochie! 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 The 3 peak condensing reality realm warriors were instantly dismembered by this blade, and the blood-red blade light pierced through their bodies, and a huge gap appeared in the main hall of the Sunflower Water stronghold. So weak, so boring. The tall and sturdy young man shook his head, and turned to leave. The moon-white robe on his body was not stained with a trace of blood. Chapter 103. There was a huge rock in the pool under the waterfall. Yichen sat down with his legs crossed, with the hidden cloud sword and its sheath on his knees. He had entered into a mysterious and ethereal state. The rumbling sound of the waterfall did not affect Yichen at all. In his perception, the world was no longer the same. The sound had completely disappeared, and the waterfall was falling slower and slower. In the end, the waterfall even started to move slowly. From time to time, a few water droplets would fly out of the waterfall. Under the sunlight, the water droplets would shine with a colorful light, like the brightest crystal. When he sensed that the waterfall had completely stopped, he opened his cold eyes. He pulled out his sword and waved it. All of his movements were done in one go, without any hesitation. Without a sound, the waterfall on the other side split into 2 and fell down in 2, unable to connect with each other. Boom! Boom! 2 loud booms came out, and the water splashed everywhere. I'm still half a step away from the sword intent. Unfortunately, this half step is the most difficult, and it will take a long time to train. Just now, Yichen had almost grasped the existence of the sword intent. Unfortunately, it was still a bit mysterious, and could only be counted as the half-step sword intent. There was still a slight gap between it and the real sword intent. Ho! As he let out a breath, Yichen slowly stood up. His body shook slightly, and the half-step sword intent immediately disappeared, making it hard for others to notice. After enjoying the scenery for a while, Yichen went back the way he came. Outside the yard, Wu Zongming saw Yichen coming back. He smiled and said, "It's not easy to find you." Yichen said, "There are only 3 days left until the inner disciple ranking competition. I want to improve my strength as soon as possible." "You're not planning to become one of the top 10 inner disciples, are you?" "More or less." Wu Zongming's eyes widened. "Really?" The top 10 inner disciples are almost as powerful as core disciples, some of them are even qualified to become core disciples. Most importantly, almost all of them are at the late condensing reality realm, and they have the power to kill normal warriors at the same level as them. The top 10 inner disciples were the most elite group of the inner disciples. Each of them had a combination of talent, perception, and willpower. They might not be as good as the core disciples, but as long as they were given enough time, who knew how far they could go? So for the sect, the top 10 inner disciples and the core disciples were equally important, and they would not be ignored just because of a temporary gap in strength. Yichen shook his head and said with a smile, "When did you lose your ambition? Aren't you just one of the top 10 inner court disciples? I heard that every year, a few people would be eliminated and new faces would appear." Wu Zongming opened his mouth, but couldn't say a word. He felt that he was indeed a bit lacking in ambition. When Yi Chen was still at Mortal Realm Stage 6, he dared to fight against Zhang Haoran, who was at the peak of Mortal Realm Stage 10. Now that he was already at the mid-condensing reality realm, why couldn't he replace the others and become one of the top 10 inner disciples? Not necessarily. You are right. I used to be the number 1 outer disciple, so I didn't feel too much pressure. But after I became an inner disciple, I was surrounded by the best of the best. With my talent and power, it was nothing at all. That's why I had been hiding my true thoughts, and planned to move up step by step. I didn't have to be so aggressive. Now that you have said it, I finally understand why the gap between me and Zhang Haoran has been increasing. It is because I have lost my courage and determination, and started to become an ordinary inner disciple. If Wu Zongming had not been with Yi Chen, he would not have realized this. But he had seen the changes in Yi Chen, and he felt that it was not a coincidence that Yi Chen could succeed, and it was worth thinking about. The joy of reaching the mid-condensing reality realm after taking the Jinqi pellet had disappeared. Wu Zongming sighed, "What a sudden awakening. I thought that the Jinqi pellet would be able to shorten the gap between us. But now, it seems that the gap is getting bigger and bigger. At least, I am not as determined as you." Yi Chen opened the door and invited him in. He said while walking, "Actually, talent is just like a stepping stone. It can give you a higher starting point than others. But if you want to keep improving, talent alone is not enough. You need to understand your own path and walk your own path." Wu Zongming forced a smile, "The path and the path are still too far for me. I really don't know what level you have reached." "Oh right, why did you want to see me?" Yi Chen asked. Wu Zongming patted his head, "I almost forgot. The ranking competition will be held in 3 days. We need to go and draw lots now." "Draw lots now?" "Yeah. Except for the top 10 inner disciples, everyone else has to draw lots and register their names. Otherwise, it would be troublesome to do it on the day of the competition." "That's true. Let's go together then." On the way, Yi Chen learned that the inner disciple ranking competition was divided into 10 groups, and each group had about 50 people. In each group, there would be one of the top 10 inner disciples, which was equivalent to a seeded contestant. The group competition would have 10 rounds, and the top 3 would have the right to go to the finals to compete for this year's top 10 inner disciple title. The others would be ranked according to the number of battles they had won. On the martial field, a big lottery box was placed there. There were 2 registrars next to it. Right now, there were already a lot of inner disciples drawing lots. Damn, so unlucky. How did I end up in Ghost Sword Li Kuang's group? You call that unlucky? My group is Blood Shadow Blade Meng Chong. Who can beat him? I have no choice but to give up if I meet him." Yi Chen was confused. He stood at the back of the line. Soon, it was his turn. He reached his hand into the lottery box and took out a thin wooden card. On it was written, Group 7, Number 28. Group seated contestant, Feng Ping. On the side, the registrar wrote down Yi Chen's name and the number of his group. After drawing lots, the 2 left the crowd. Wu Zongming asked, "Which group are you in? Who is the seated contestant?" "Group 5. The seated contestant is Feng Ping. Flying Wind Feng Ping. Wu Zongming was dazed for a second and said, he is ranked 6th among the top 10 inner disciples. His light body technique is ridiculously good. It is said that he can fly in the wind as if he is weightless. He is one of the more difficult ones to deal with. Luckily it was not me. Otherwise, I wouldn't even be able to touch his clothes. Ridiculously good light body technique. Yi Chen was interested. To him, light body technique was also one of his advantages. He wondered how it would compare with Flying Wind Feng Ping. As for Wu Zongming, he was in Group 3. The seated contestant was called Xiaoyi. He was ranked 3rd among the top 10 inner disciples. He was even higher than Pei Shaoqing and Ghost Sword Li Kuang. He was a dual cultivator. His defense and attack were terrifyingly high. After leaving the martial field, the two went their separate ways. The third day. On the night before the ranking competition, Yi Chen had finally reached the peak of the mid-condensing reality realm. His Jin Qi was more than 30% stronger than before. At the same time, his pure Jun Jin Qi had also reached the peak of the 7th stage. His Qi swords were almost solid, they were even more powerful than the sword light. Now, everything was ready. He just had to wait for the ranking competition to start the next day. Chapter 104. Dong! 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 Early in the morning, the sound of a bell came from the martial field of the Windy Mountain, wave after wave, spreading out for dozens of miles. On the mountain road, people from all over the world had gathered. Among these people, there were leaders of small martial institutions, leaders of big families, head guards of escort agencies, leaders of gangs, business leaders, city leaders of nearby cities, and some famous martial artists. Leader Liu, you are here too. Of course I am. The Sky Cloud Martial School is the biggest martial institution within tens of thousands of miles. Our small martial institutions cannot compete with them at all. So this time, I brought a few of my best disciples to watch the battles, hoping to inspire them. I also brought 2 young martial artists from the business, to show them what true geniuses are, so they don't get into trouble everywhere. Same here. These people did not usually interact with each other, but they still knew each other. They walked together in groups of 3 to 5, talking and laughing. At this time, it was obvious who had more power and who was more powerful, because only the powerful ones could make others surround them, not the other way around. In the inner disciple area, Yi Chen casually closed the door of his courtyard and started to walk towards the noisy martial plaza. So many people. Arriving at the martial field, Yi Chen was a little surprised. Last year, because he was beaten by Wang Gang, he was bedridden for a month, and missed the opportunity to watch the ranking competition. He had never seen such a spectacular scene of tens of thousands of people gathered in one place. There were 10 huge platforms in the martial field, each of them was round and 3 meters tall, and combined with the other platforms to form a flower pattern, it was very beautiful. The 10 platforms were surrounded by a circle of VIP seats, and above the VIP seats were the audience seats. From afar, the entire martial field looked like an iron pot. The bottom of the iron pot was the battle site, and the 4 sides of the iron pot were the seats for the audience. Yi Chen, over here. In the open space between the platform and the VIP seats, a large group of inner disciples stood there. Wu Zongming waved at Yi Chen. With a gust of wind under his feet, he walked over. Wu Zongming was slightly excited as he said, Group 3 and Group 7's platforms are one after the other. Let's just stay here. But I'm a little nervous now. Look, the people in the VIP seats are all important people. Even your father is here. Yi Chen followed his gaze and saw his father, Yi Tianhao, and his mother, Shen Yuqing, in the VIP seats. Yi Tianhao and Shen Yuqing smiled at Yi Chen, their eyes were filled with expectation and pride. They had never thought that Yi Chen would be able to join the Sky Cloud Martial School's inner disciple ranking competition. Even if he could join, he would be at the bottom. But now, it was different. They already knew that Yi Chen had reached the mid-condensing reality realm, plus his talent in martial arts, he should be able to get into the top 200. Yichen gave them a reassuring look before withdrawing his gaze. At this time, the inner court disciples were basically all here, only the top 10 inner court disciples were still missing. Suddenly, the outer sect disciples in the spectator stands burst into cheers that soared to the sky. The top 10 inner disciples are here. The one in the middle should be Blood Shadow Blade Brother Meng Chong, right? Next to Brother Meng Chong is Iron Fan Brother Yi Qing, Brother Xiao Yi, Sister Zhou Rua, and Brother Pei Xiaoqing. So powerful. Just like the others, the inner disciples who had arrived earlier all looked at the 10 people at the wide entrance. These 10 people were the top 10 inner disciples. Some of them were arrogant and overflowing with killing intent. Some of them were 2 meters tall and looked like ancient demonic beasts. Some of them had a smile on their faces and looked calm. Some of them had a face like a peach blossom and had a lithe body. Some of them were expressionless and had cold eyes. As the 10 of them walked together, an indistinct, earth-shaking aura spread out, attracting the attention of the important figures in the VIP seats. So powerful, just the aura alone is enough to overwhelm people. Wu Zongming gasped. Yichen smiled faintly, he didn't feel anything. He looked around and found that most of the people had lost their confidence and unnaturally looked away. Of course, there were also a small number of people who had excited expressions in their eyes. As long as he could beat them, they would be able to become the top 10 inner disciples. What was the purpose of a man's life? Wasn't it just for pride? Who did not want to be powerful and be admired by others? And the top 10 inner disciples were the best starting point. Because the platforms were in different directions, the top 10 inner disciples all spread out. On Yichen's side, there was flying in the wind Feng Ping, Madman Xiao Yi, and also Zhou Rua, who was also one of the top 10 inner disciples. There was a total of 3 people, they were 3 steps away from each other, not too far away, but not too close either. I don't think there are any powerful inner disciples on our side. Feng Ping looked around and said to Xiao Yi and Zhou Rua. Xiao Ye's long hair was draped over his shoulders, he looked extremely wild, they are still too young. In the past 5 years, the most unpopular one was only 3 disciples who got kicked out of the ranking. Normally, it would be good if 2 disciples got kicked out. Feng Ping looked away from Yi Chen and the others, he did not pay too much attention to them. After all, without reaching the late condensing reality realm, there was basically no way one could get into the top 10. In the past 5 years, there was only one core disciple, Su Jing, that freak. Even the hidden fragrance sword Zhu Mei got the title of top 10 inner disciples when she was only at the late condensing reality realm, and then became a core disciple. Zhou Rua, whose face was like a peach blossom, said lightly, "Don't be too careless, you might fail miserably. The Sky Cloud Martial School might have a second sister Su Jing." Wu Zongming said to Yi Chen in a low voice, "You didn't see the ranking competition 2 years ago? Sister Su Jing won all the battles with her mid-condensing reality realm cultivation and became the top 10 inner disciples. When she becomes a core disciple, then Brother Meng Chong, the Blood Shadow Blade, will have the chance to be the top 10 inner disciples." Yi Chen nodded, he had never seen the full extent of Su Jing's power. Even in the Northwest Plain, she did not use all of her power. It was hard to imagine how powerful she really was. The top 10 inner disciples were not easy to deal with, each of them had the power to kill warriors at the same level as them within seconds. It would be very difficult, almost impossible, to beat them. Wu Zongming changed his tone and said, "But Brother Meng Chong, the Blood Shadow Blade, was not that powerful the year before. It was only last year that he started to show his power, and no one could stop him." Some people said that he was already in the top 10 of the core disciples, and only after the ranking competition, he would be able to challenge the core disciples. While the two were talking, the head elder of the Sky Cloud Martial School flew onto the platform in the center. Clearing his throat, the head elder raised his voice and said, "Everyone, welcome to the annual Sky Cloud Martial School's Inner Disciple Ranking Competition. This year's ranking competition is the same as the previous years. There will be 10 groups, and each group will have a seeded contestant with a number of 0. They will participate in the group competition after 5 rounds, and all the previous rounds will be considered as wins. The competition will be done by drawing lots randomly. The 2 people whose numbers are drawn will have to fight on the platform to determine the winner. Also, the competition will be based on a point system. You will get 2 points for a win, 1 point for a draw, and 0 for a loss. The top 3 in the group will have the right to compete in the finals for the top 10 inner disciples. Let's cut to the chase. The ranking competition officially begins. As soon as the head elder finished speaking, the entire martial field became noisy again, and the sound waves reached the sky. Nodding with satisfaction, the head elder flashed back to the Sky Cloud Martial School's elder seats. Next to the platform, the deacons had already started to draw lots. The first group, number 3 against number 9. The second group, number 5 against number 23. The third group, hearing the head elder, all the inner disciples walked onto their respective platforms and started to fight with their opponents. Chapter 105. Coincidentally, Wu Zongming's opponent in the first battle of Group 3 was also at the mid-condensing reality realm, just like him. Burning Fist. On the stage, Wu Zongming yelled. He jumped up and threw a punch at his opponent. Boom! Hot sparks flew everywhere. The inner disciple was pushed back a couple of steps. After gaining the upper hand with only 1 move, Wu Zongming did not stop there. He performed his top-rank Mortal Realm skill, Flame Desolate Fist, to its limit. Dozens of fiery fist shadows spread out like a peacock's tail, causing his opponent to have no chance to fight back. After getting off the stage, Wu Zongming said casually, "Not bad, the first opponent is not that strong. It's only the first round, don't show too much of your power." Yi Chen reminded his opponent. "I know, don't worry. A battle would usually end in the time it takes for 1/5 of an incense stick to burn. Rarely would 2 people be at the same level, and it would be hard to tell who would win." Some groups' battles ended quickly, and the second battle of the first round had already started. Group 7, number 8 against number 28. Wu Zongming said, "Yi Chen, it's your turn." "Yeah." Yi Chen nodded and jumped onto the stage of Group 7. Peak of the mid-condensing reality realm, my luck is not bad. Yi Chen's opponent was a teenager with straight eyebrows. He was holding a huge ringed blade. The blade was surrounded by a yellow chi flow. It looked extremely heavy. Yi Chen was speechless. His opponent was also at the peak of the mid-condensing reality realm. Why was he so lucky? Lose! The teenager with straight eyebrows suddenly rushed forward. The hard rock under his feet suddenly cracked. The huge ringed blade in his hands drew a thick arc in the air, directly attacking towards Yi Chen. Yi Chen shook his head. He casually waved his right hand. His whole arm was so fast that it left no shadow. It easily knocked away his opponent's huge ringed blade. His opponent thought that the blade was in his hand. He was about to attack again. Who? The 2 were 5 steps away from each other. The teenager with straight eyebrows did not have a blade. He said in frustration, "Where is my blade?" Yi Chen pointed to his left. The teenager with straight eyebrows looked over. His huge ringed blade was stuck on the edge of the stage. It was shaking. He did not have the face to stay on the stage anymore. He pulled out his blade and jumped off the stage with a red face. He hated Yi Chen to death. He made him lose face like this. Unsurprisingly, Yi Chen won 1 battle. He got 2 points. Then came the second round, the third round, and all the way to the 5th round, where Yi Chen easily defeated his opponents without much effort. His score had reached 10 points. Wu Zongming lost 1 battle in the 4th round. He got 8 points. On the other side, Zhang Haoran was in the 10th group. He had broken through to the mid-condensing reality realm a while ago, and he had also won 5 battles in a row, gaining 10 points. On the other hand, Huang Bingwen, who had battled with Yi Chen before, seemed to have improved. He had only lost 1 out of the 5 battles, and had accumulated 8 points just like Wu Zongming. After the 5 rounds of competition had ended, the Great Elder announced a half-an-hour break, allowing everyone to recover their true chi and physical strength. On the eastern side of the VIP seats, Yi Tianhao smiled at Shin Yuqing and said, "Chen Er is doing well." He actually won 5 matches in a row, and it looks like he's having it easy. Shen Yuqing was also very happy. He said, "We were worried for nothing. In the past 6 months, Chener's progress is extraordinary. There's hope for him to enter the top 100. Indeed, let's wait and see." The half-hour break was over, and the competition continued. Unlike the first 5 rounds, the last 5 rounds would have seeded players joining the fray. If you didn't meet them, you could count yourself lucky, but if you did, you could only brace yourself and fight. This time, Wu Zongming was really unlucky. Although he did not run into any seeded contestants, he ran into an inner disciple who was at the late condensing reality realm. After a dozen attacks, he was defeated. Zhang Haoran continued his winning streak, accumulating 12 points. Huang Bingwen lost 1 match, but he still had 8 points. The 7th battle of the 6th round, it was Yi Chen's turn again. "Hee, little brat, your winning streak ends here." The one who spoke was a young man with squinted eyes. He was about 17 or 18 years old, which was a bit older than most of the inner disciples. He had accumulated a lot of battle experience over the years, and could usually be ranked around 100. Shoo! This time, Yi Chen took the initiative to attack. He performed his crane shadow steps and disappeared from his opponent's sight. When he saw Yi Chen again, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. The strong fist power had pushed him off the ground and out of the stage. He fell heavily on the ground. The squinted young man could not believe what he had just seen. How is this possible? He defeated me with only 1 attack. How powerful is he? Feng Ping, this disciple is not simple. It seems like he has been hiding his true power. Zhou Rua glanced at Yi Chen and said to Feng Ping. Feng Ping shook his head and laughed. Compared to the other inner disciples, he is indeed a lot more powerful. But against me, he can only lose. Xiao Yi grinned. Although he is not your opponent, he still has a chance to enter the top 3 in the group. After another round, it was the 9th round. Number 0 versus number 24. It's your turn. Xiao Yi crossed his arms in front of his chest and said. Whoosh! A light wind swept across, and Feng Ping's shadow was blown away. When he looked again, he was already on the stage. Such a fast technique, when did he get on the stage? He is indeed the flying in the wind Feng Ping. His movement is almost like the wind, invisible and formless. All the inner disciples looked at each other. Yi Chen frowned. Although Feng Ping's speed was unbelievably fast, what was really scary was that he could blend in with the wind. Once he combined the two, his Qing Gong would have a qualitative improvement, and it would give people an illusion that they could not understand. Of course, that did not include him. Brother Feng, my name is Gao Liang, nice to meet you. The square-faced young man knew the difference in power between them, so he said respectfully. Feng Ping nodded, bring it on. I will not go too far. Hearing him, the square-faced young man's face turned serious. He took out his sword from the scabbard and swung it in the air towards Feng Ping. Swoosh 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 swoosh. The sword vibrated in the air, and 4 sword shadows appeared. Each sword shadow was extremely sharp, and they cut the air into pieces. Seeing that the tip of the sword was about to hit Feng Ping, the square-faced young man's face flashed with joy. At this moment, Feng Ping moved, his body leaned back, and kept the same distance from the tip of the sword as he floated backwards. How is this possible? My sword's speed is not as fast as his movement technique. After chasing for more than 10 steps, the square-faced young man still could not hit his opponent, and his expression changed drastically. Feng Ping was not interested in playing with his opponent anymore, so he flicked his finger on the tip of the sword. Chin! With a light flick, the square-faced young man could barely hold the sword in his hand. The sword light that he had just condensed was instantly shattered, and his plan to attack through the air had failed. Immediately after, he was kicked in the chest, and blood came out from the corner of his mouth as he flew backwards. Brother Feng is too powerful. Feng Yan has been winning all this time, but he was still defeated so easily. Just how powerful are the top 10 inner disciples? Very powerful, Brother Feng did not even use his full strength. Looks like no one in our group can beat Brother Feng. That number 28 Yi Chen is definitely not Brother Feng's opponent.